Hello, and welcome everyone to this week's episode of the Safety Brief. Today, we're diving into the critical importance of testing and vetting in the cybersecurity industry, and honestly, just kind of all industries. As always, I have Mike and Matt here. Thank you both for your time.
Thanks for having
Hello.
us.
Of course. So let's start with why thorough testing and vetting is essential in cybersecurity industry, particularly when it comes to preventing service disruptions or possible breaches and or even vulnerabilities.
Yeah, Elizabeth, it's a good topic, and I'm glad it's a timely topic. I know that you map out these topics sometimes, many weeks in advance to make sure that we have consistent value we can bring our listeners. But the timeliness is wild, specifically because of the impact. We talk a lot about what bad actors can do. We talk a lot about what attacks can happen, and the impact is immense, obviously. And there's a reason that cyber insurance adoption is at an all-time high. There's a recognition of businesses seeing this as a tangible threat, and the threat ultimately being downtime. And I think where we talk about the critical role of testing and vetting is no different than if you're testing out a new piece of equipment on a vehicle before it goes to production. There is impact that could be had for lack of testing, right? And so the impact could be an outage. It could be a lack of security posture. It could be really anything. So obviously, we approach this from a core values perspective. At Blockworks, as it's already been mentioned, has a winning and learning culture. And so that means that we're never really losing. We're never really, there's never a moment that something happens maybe or something goes wrong or less than ideal or falls out of process. It's all a learning moment. And so as we approach this topic, as Elizabeth pointed out, specifically, the role of testing and vetting in any industry. It's not one limited to cybersecurity. It's not one limited to IT. Is incredibly important. So I'm sure there's a lot of good analogies we'll come up with off the top of the head on why this is important. But everything requires its measure twice, cut once, a little bit of due diligence, right?
Yeah, you're definitely right. There's a lot that we could actually attribute to this. There's a lot of questions. There's a lot of concern. Um, Frankly, after what happened on Friday, there's a lot of anger. Some of it very misguided, but it all goes to raise a question, and I mean it does. There's valid concerns, lots of valid concerns. So one of the things that we like to think about is how could we prevent something like this from happening. Um, I'm gonna I'm gonna be the one that probably brings the mood down, but the larger the environment, the less likely you are to have a proper testing plan in place. So why do I say that? Well, the larger the environment, the more machines you're going to have to get updated. If you are receiving content updates that are daily, that puts you in a bind. Um, when I was at a prior vendor that actually did, regular content updates, it was not uncommon for people to run what we called N minus one. Sadly, it was because of the same issue that we just experienced just long ago. The problem you ran into with that is the larger your environment gets, your IT team then has to go through and they have to validate each one of those content files that's coming out. So now you're running a day behind, but you have to validate it in every one of your departments. Well, what if you can't validate it in one or two of the departments? You don't want to run, you don't want to push an update to people and have them running, the version that is out there, but this one or two departments unable to actually receive that update. So now they're N minus two. And you're getting a mismatch in your environment that's going to cause actually more of a security issue because you're self-imposing holes. This means that, unfortunately, larger environments are more prone to blindly trusting and just letting things go through because they already have so many other things that they're having to work on trying to have a testing and validation plan in place for all of these endpoints becomes almost insurmountable. You'd need almost a team just to do that as you get larger. Ironically, the company that I actually, was a part of, they were running N-1 up to N-3 in their own environment while pushing out content daily. So there were people that were actually running a newer build than we did internally. Now, I get it. It's kind of painful to have to try and think about that. But this is where, going through creating a process, creating a testing plan, making sure you have everything in place can expedite the process of doing all of this validation, help keep you safe, but also help keep you secured.
Yeah, no, and speaking of pain points, a lot of people dread testing and the approval process, but other than like dread and obviously forgetting, like you said, Matt, what are some common challenges or pitfalls organizations face when conducting testing, and how can they overcome these challenges?
Yeah, I think, I'll use an analogy from my own upbringing. My father was like a journeyman electrician, so he had his own electrical contracting business for 20 plus years in the Southeast region, and specifically where number one, where do challenges come from? It's timelines. It's timelines. Every team, whether it's construction, whether it's development, whether it's, in any form of DevOps role or construction role, right? Like blue collar or keyboard driver alike, there are timelines that all of us at work have to meet. And there are constraints. There are budget constraints. There's very many constraints that we're just trying to meet by certain deadlines. And so I'd always remember, he'd come home on a Thursday or Friday and then have to go back to work. And it was always like, it's inspection week. It's inspection week, right? We got to make sure the work we've done on floors 1 through 8 is stamped, is good by the inspector. Otherwise, we can't keep working on the rest of the building. We have to go backwards, not forwards, and redo work. And well, why is that so dreadful? Is because it's a checks and balance. It's an accountability piece. It's making sure that, number one, the building is constructed, and in this case, wired electrically from a safe perspective, and there are things, obviously, different standards in different cultures in different places around the world. Us being centric to the United States, you have things like OSHA. There are regulations in place that say this is how you do something safely. This is how you operate a construction site to a certain level of risk mitigation. Cyber's no different. It's no different. It's certainly less physical. It's more logical, less tangible. You can't look out and touch it and feel it all the time. But specifically, where the concept can be applied is, does that week have a level of suck to it? Most definitely. But what is the risk that we are mitigating by navigating that level of controlled inconvenience, if you will, right? And so is it not, maybe, are we going to be delayed by a few weeks? Sure. Guess what's not going to happen? The building's not going to have an electrical fire in 20 years, statistically speaking, because we go through the due diligence now. And that is a far larger, far more costly, far more terrible impact kinetically. And it's mitigated. The risk of it happening is mitigated by these inspections. And so I just remember, my dad would come home and be like, you have to go back out. And he's like, yeah, man, inspection week. It's like however many hours you need, however much time you got to put in, that there is due diligence that is needed specific to those types of dev and prod and UAT environments, really, truly. And so if it's a new feature, if it's a new bug, but what are the challenges or pitfalls? Timelines, budget, all of those things, right? Logistics is a big hurdle that a lot of teams navigate. And for those listening and watching, kind of nodding your head, you get it. There very few people that have to meet the timeline control the timeline. And that's just reality. So
it's the butting of heads between the finance office and those that actually do the work. And I hate to say it, but the finance office controls way more of your environment than what you really consider. Anything that you want, from headcount to new technology to everything, has to go through them first. So while the IT teams that you have, while your security teams, everybody, they're completely down with putting all of this testing in place, all the validation in place, a lot of times they're getting told no from from elsewhere within the company, because it's not something that they can see as fiscally responsible. Or, I hate to say this, but a lot of times, most of the support based organizations and IT, like internal tech based organizations, are looked at as a cost center. They aren't looked at as profitable. They're looked at as a sink. And it's, how do we minimize the amount that we are losing in that sink, but still staying as secure as we can? And a lot of times there is a determination made where you kind of skimp out on getting certain things done and just hope and pray. And unfortunately today, hope and pray is really not a good way of operating a business.
No, it is not. I completely agree with that. Now let's discuss a recent incident that kind of underlines the importance of thorough testing and vetting. This is not meant to criticize anyone. At Blockworks, we believe in winning and learning, growing from every experience. So we do extend any apologies to anyone who experienced downtime or stress from this event, as such incidents can happen to anyone at really any time. So with that being said, can you explain the significance of the recent CrowdStrike outage and what vulnerabilities or weaknesses were exposed during that incident?
I'd say
Or
the
could have
vulnerability. Yeah, I'd say the vulnerability exposed was market share. I think, as silly as that may sound, or as different that may sound, it's the long said adage of the bigger you are, the harder you fall. And it's no different than Microsoft. It's no different than SolarWinds supply chain. It's no different than ConnectWise and Screen Connect supply chain. It's no different than Kaseya supply chain, right? Like, they're the threat actors. And this, to be clear, there is no evidence that says the events on Friday were contributed to or attributed by a threat attack, right? It is a product release or an update system file, .sys file gone wrong, right? So I just want to be very clear here before everybody comes to us in the comment section, right? The comment section is always one of the most hospitable places where everybody just chooses to make their home. But specifically, what I mean by is threat actors are going to target, in their methodology, large ponds where there's lots of fish, right? And so the vulnerability here is based on the impact. Threat actors are now looking at CrowdStrike as like, wow, well, if I take CrowdStrike down, that's a large majority of a lot of the infrastructure around the world. And so it's almost as if you've left your footprint in the sand now, and people can look at it, they can trace it. And a lot of companies don't, that's not tangible, right? You have revenue numbers, you have market share numbers, you have the Gartner Magic Quadrant, you have all these, facts, figures, and research you can do, but you don't often get a perfectly traced outline of what a platform's adoption is, such as what we got on Friday, right? Everything that didn't work, most likely backed by, I went to the gym Friday morning, like 7 a.m. I tried to book a class through the app online, and it wasn't working. I thought it was a glitch, or the class was full. So I called them, and sure enough, they're like, no, our booking system's down. I'm so sorry. And I'm like, well, rest assured, it's not just you. Like, there's a lot of people having trouble this morning, from the bank you went to drive down the street to the pharmacy to pick up your medication at the hospital, right? Like, it was significant. It was significant. And that goes without being said, right? Everybody most likely listening to this is aware of the event, is aware it's significant. The interesting component here is the outline that was left. And I think, threat actors are looking at this. They are taking pause. They are absolutely scheming, as they always do. But the interesting component here of that vulnerability being process, just following a good process. And it's not something that gets a lot of airtime in cybersecurity podcasts and talk shows and events and panels, but process, as our beloved Clint likes to say, process saves careers. And that is incredibly poetic, taking into account the past 7 days, that process does indeed save careers. You got to have, and in twofold. You can have a process and it could be missed or not followed or not aligned to. It could be outdated, or you can just have, you don't have process. You have a blind spot that you're not aware to that needs a process. And so, not gonna beat the process horse to death, but specifically, I think the vulnerability or weakness we saw, number one, is the now visual, plume cloud of market share. Like you could physically look at it and see it. Like that's significant. That's significant. But as well as the component of internal process, what does dev, UAT, and production workflow look like, rings and releases. And Matt, our relationship in the past 5 years has been very much, we interact often in the past 4 years around rings, releases, GA, beta, and the impact it's had on users. So this is not a new thing to us. It's not a new thing to a lot of organizations, but we have proceeded with such caution for good reason, for reasons like this, because there have been feature updates gone wrong. And
I'm going to
this
need you
isn't
to
the
never
first.
say ring and release in the same sentence again, because that
Yeah.
triggers PTSD.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's crazy. But again, so I want to say this. Number one, product releases go south all the time. You could do all the testing in the world. Microsoft's Patch Tuesday is still the infamous day that if anything breaks and it's a Tuesday, you can look at it and be like, I know why.
Oh, yeah.
Let me roll back. Just a small 60-second side story. I was serving on a red team in a test environment. It was stood up by a cyber range of a college, and I'm building injects. I'm building payloads and runtimes and scripts and all this. And I was exploiting a vulnerability in Windows Defender, and we were working Saturday, Sunday, Monday on the injects. We were planning our attacks to simulate for the blue team to detect and beat the bad guys, kick them out, right? And so as I was functioning on the red team, ran all my injects, got my beacons there, they were all good. Come Tuesday morning, we run through the same steps, nothing worked. And we're like, what the heck? What happened, right? So even for bad guys, Tuesday breaks things. And so sure enough, Windows updates pushed to the test environment, pulled everything that we had as far as vulnerabilities out, which is great. Update your systems. That's the moral of that story. But that being said, there is testing and vetting that bad guys are doing, right? Because they get one shot. When they start putting their name on the radar and they start doing things that are a little bit noisier on the environment, you better believe that they've labbed this out, as far as testing and vetting, and no different for blue teams and internal DevOps teams.
I mean, the one main thing that it did was it showed everybody, and I hate to say this, who would be a potential target.
Yeah,
because when you have an incident like this, and first and foremost, we need to be clear. This is not the first time this has happened. It has happened many times in the last year by different companies. The problem is this time it was somebody that actually had market share, which goes to show you how many times it can happen when your company is small or, minimal impact. But somebody who actually has an impact, well, it's catastrophic. Within the first 15 minutes of this being identified and seeing that there was a common thread that was going, research was conducted into how could this be, remediated. Steps were put out, but there were other steps that weren't publicized. There were bypasses available that would completely circumvent the product that had not been patched out. And that was something that was actually found and leveraged. Now, also within that short period of time, threat actors started creating different domains and started trying to get them to propagate so that when you searched for something that was related to an incident, it would take you to one of their malicious websites. Even more so, they know that people, when they get into a situation where there is a panic or anything that, causes any kind of emotional activity, you don't think straight. So they started putting out fake update files. Well, we analyzed one of them and actually found that it was a command and control. Once it got on your machine, it would start communicating, but not through normal means. It was kind of interesting to watch. It was actually leveraging API calls on the back end, talking to Telegram. And it was an automated bot that was having a conversation on the back end. So, obviously we were able to prevent that. which is good. Other vendors, built-in preventions, which is good. But that's what happens when you have a market share like this. You don't need somebody to email you to say, hey, do you want a client list for CrowdStrike? You don't need one, because all you need to do is look at every company that's impacted right now, and you now have a comprehensive list, which is generally not a good thing. I mean, the last thing you want is, if you're at the company, you don't want everybody knowing who all your customers are. That's a bad thing. But B, you really don't want the world knowing who exactly is impacted, because that's where people are going to jump in and start taking advantage of that. The worst thing, and I will say this is even worse. I mean, this is terrible. This has been brought up on a couple podcasts that I actually listened to. The one thing that is looked down on worse than threat actors is trying to drag somebody through the mud when they are already having a bad day. When you put up a hotline, and the entire premise behind the hotline is to tell people when they call you how this wouldn't happen if you used us. Dude, that's a low move.
Yeah, we did
Like,
a podcast with stating this can happen to anyone at any
exactly.
time. So there's a time.
Exactly. And you know what? That company that was doing that, I don't think they want to know about their vulnerabilities, because there's a lot of them. So the old adage of people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones really rings true. Because if you decide you want to go and play dirty like that, I can promise you that somebody is going to go ahead and expose your dirty laundry as well. And that's not what you want in this world. The cyber community needs to be working together. They need to be sharing and bolstering one another to try and get ahead of the current threats. That's the only way that we win.
Mm-hmm.
We are perpetually behind the eight ball. Everybody likes to think that they are the smartest person in the room. Well, guess what? The 12-year-old overseas is the smartest person in the room, because they're the ones that are breaching you. And if we don't all work together to figure out the new tactics that they're using because they're thinking outside the box, then we're going to lose overall. Instances like this just put us further back, because now there's remediation. There's a lack of trust. It's how do we overcome what just happened and regain the faith of, people in the industry, because now everybody's looking at their programs like, well, crap, can this happen to mine?
Do I even need it if this is
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of questions. I've seen people that are saying, oh, well, we weren't impacted because our machines were offline, but we're still going to get rid of them.
Which is
Why? You weren't impacted.
Yeah.
Yes, there was an impact, but you know what? How long have they been a company as a whole? And how many times has something like this actually occurred? It's few and far between. But again, it's part of having humans at the core of what we're doing. Mistakes are always going to be a possibility. It's not how you get knocked down in cyber, it's how you get back up. There's no point putting people down. Just get up, work harder, get past it, and then fight the bad guys. That's why we're all here. None of us signed up because we thought, cyber sounds like it'll be an easy walk in the park every day.
Right.
No, you have to be a little bit damaged in the head in order to voluntarily say, I want to work in cyber all day, every day. Trust me.
We got to clip that. That's got to be the highlight from this episode.
Oh, crap.
The critical role of testing and vetting. You got to be a little, gotta
Am
love.
I
What is it?
wrong, though?
What is it like? You like pain or you like suffering, whatever it
Masochism.
is. Yeah, you got to have a little bit of that, being like, that's what I
You-
want to do 40 hours a week.
there's
right?
a bunch there's different types of people that get into cyber, and there's some that suffer from the Rubik's disease, and it's they have to find the solution to the puzzle.
Oh yeah,
That's the
Yeah,
people that are, some people have the Rubik's disease, some
Dr. House
just
types.
love the pain.
Yeah.
And I mean, me, I work very well through chaos. Like, if it's peaceful and it's serene, I'm more worried than anything. When there's utter chaos going on, I can see right through the chaos.
Silence.
You're having a pretty good week then.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's been a,
He's
I
like,
mean,
I've gotten more done this week.
honestly, it's been more about supporting people I know that have been dealing with the issue or were impacted by the issue.
Right.
That's another thing. We always want to help. So
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, that's the thing. We as a company love to help people, and we love to educate. This is less education, and this is more, if you need somebody to talk to, right now is a perfect time to find that person that's willing to listen,
mhm.
because it's going to be stressful and you're going to need, you know, an outlet where you can vent. I can't talk to most people I know. I can't talk to my wife about things that I do. The second I open my mouth about work, glazed look. It's
Family
I
is
appreciate the attempt of listening, but it's not registering. It
Losing it
never
in the
will.
ones and zeros.
Yeah, it's gone. So that's why you need to have a support group that's able to actually, be there in times like this. That's going to keep you sane.
Right.
Yeah, and speaking about having a community to speak about cybersecurity, Blockworks is actually launching our very first partner portal. We're hosting a webinar this August, and that is
Hmm.
posted on our socials and has been sent out via email. So if you are a Blockworks partner or interested in the portal, feel free to reach out to sales@blockworks.com.
I'll give you guys a little bit of a spoiler.
Oh
We
no.
put a whole bunch of stuff up there about different threats, the assessment, everything.
Oh
But
yeah.
it's not for public consumption. It's
Right.
only for our partners to get access to that.
What was it? We
We
talked about it last week. What is it? It's not surface web. It's deep web.
Yeah, it's deep web.
It's
Yeah,
deep web.
Yeah.
yeah,
That's right.
yeah. Very, very good reference to that.
Hey, I'm
Yes.
learning. I'm learning. One step at a time, 1 week at a time, winning and learning.
So moving on, balance is also crucial. So how can organizations balance the need for rigorous testing and vetting without disrupting their operational efficiency or time to market for new technologies or updates?
That's where you need to have a group that is dedicated for testing.
Yeah.
Back in the day, we had specified machines along with specified users within our organization that were tagged as, a tester machine. They were understood, they were read in to everything about, there is a possibility there could be adverse effects on your machine at some point. They understood and accepted that, and they wanted to be a part of ensuring that everything was working functionally and properly before it was sent out. Now, the reason that we recommend doing that, and this is still something that we do today, we do validation before we send it out. We do small test groups, and then if it's good on that, we send to a little more until we get to 100%. Now, there's a lot of reason as to why you would want to do that, and that's basically because, I mean, if something goes wrong, you don't want it going to everybody. You want to be able to say, okay, good, I understand it hit these, halt it for now. Only test machines were impacted. Let's get it fixed. Then we can continue the rollout and do the validation starting from, that group again. If the issue is no longer there for them, push to a few more, get it out there.
Yeah, I was
It's
really shocked that there wasn't segments with that CrowdStrike.
That is actually, and I'm going to say this because I've heard a lot of people that have gone after CrowdStrike about that.
I'm
That's
just
not a CrowdStrike issue.
yeah.
I would like to point you guys to your lovely console that you obviously log into. There is an option there where you can turn off the automatic updating aspect of things. If you left that on by default because you thought it was an easy bake oven, you can't blame anybody but yourselves. That's where you need to have the plans that we've talked about in place. You need to have a testing plan and a rollout plan. You can't just leave it on, hope that everything goes good, and then on the one time that something goes bad, say, well, they shouldn't have done that. Okay. Well, what about you? Yeah, that dude may have run the stop sign, but if you were going 100 miles an hour, would you have gotten there at that same time?
Yeah, I think it goes into how you can't just set and forget cybersecurity tools, which is why Blockworks sells the sword and the samurai. I'll never forget that analogy from my interview. So I loved that. Well, finally, let's break down the Blockworks process. How does Blockworks approach testing and vetting for products, updates, and so on to minimize the risk of downtime, and possible mishaps?
Very easy. We just don't update. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Please don't think that's true. No, there's a lot of process that goes into everything that we do. Our operations team has countless processes in place to ensure that everything is rolled out, vetted, and handled the right way. Our dev team on the back end, they are actually the ones that handle that rollout process. The level of communication that is provided to all groups as a part of the upgrade process as to where we stand, percentage, what level of failure are we seeing, it's it's all very transparent, and that makes sure that everybody is in the know.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And Matt's on the more operational side than I am, at least currently. But I will say, like even personally, there's platforms such as Apple with iOS that they have a fair amount of users that opt into a beta. They openly
Mm-hmm.
say, "Hey, I want the latest and greatest, and I accept the risk of maybe some stuff not working, maybe some hiccups, maybe some downtime, maybe some interruptions." And as a beta user on one of the devices I have, there are interruptions, there are things that don't load right, there are things that right, and the whole point of it is to kind of sacrifice a little bit of that convenience, and you get a positive, you get some new features, you get whatever, but there are trade-offs with that, and immediately before you enroll your device into, for example, Apple's beta program, they say you cannot proceed until you back up your device. You just, for assuming everything will go wrong, you need to immediately back up your device so that you have a restore point if something does go wrong. So there's a couple of lessons in that. Number one, find within your partner base, your consumer base, your software base, a group of users that want to opt into that, and a group of companies. There may be some that say, absolutely, we'll take a 5% discount a month to be beta testers, or we'll say, hey, we'll take the newest features if that's what's coming down, and we'll accept a little level of risk, right? But to Matt's point, the communication is everything. I'd be very curious once the smoke clears, what kind of communication went out on the update coming out, on what to expect, on what proactiveness, saying, hey, we get this all the time, right? We'll get an email, hey, in the month of July, the city of Coral Gables or wherever it is doing water flushing or water filter testing, right? Because of this, you may see a slight discoloration in your water. You may see fire hydrants being drained outside, whatever. It's the who, what, when, where, and why we're doing what we're doing, right? It's proactive maintenance. It's proactive notification. And so your city lets you know they're doing this. Your power company hopefully lets you know they're doing this when they do stuff like that. But again, like all maintenance, it can go south. It can go south. Ever get a fence installed in your yard and you get a cable cut, really quick of, hey, what happens when you don't measure twice, cut once. And so, but yeah, I mean, our process is an actively growing component of our business, right? As it is at any, but specifically where we find success is we have partners that have opted into betas on the partner program, betas on the partner platform, betas on the endpoint security tools we use, things of that nature, right? And so again, find a level of users that'll say, I accept a level of risk in order to ensure that I'm aiding in this testing process. I would say eat your own dog food. Don't push any update you haven't pushed internally, so that you could say, hey, I have run this personally in my environment for X number of days or whatever it is, and I've confirmed it's good. I haven't had any issues. And then obviously making sure that you diversify your test fleet. It can't all be the same make, model machine and the same processor and the same RAM and the same hard drive, right? Like that's not a diverse. You've confirmed it works on one machine many times, not many machines many times, right? And so just making sure you diversify your test group is really important as well.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you both for joining, and thank you to all of our listeners, whether you're here live, watching the recordings on a video platform, or listening on the podcast version. We appreciate your support and are dedicated to spreading awareness. and we hope that this session has provided valuable insights for you. As always, stay frosty.
Thanks all.